Episode 371, The Disappearing Act. "Okay, I'll do it," Luther said. He put the phone to his ear and made the call while everyone stood and watched him. "Ryan," he said once the call had connected, "this is Luther Duncan." "Hello, Mr. Duncan," said the man on the other end of the call. This was Ryan Maxwell. He was a kind of mediator who had a hand in arranging matters between leading members of the martial arts community. "Has everything been arranged to your satisfaction?" "No! Alex is now the Lord of the Moon Palace," Luther said. "So we need a new strategy." "The Moon Palace?" Ryan asked. And then he fell silent for a moment. "That makes things much more difficult. Tyson can hardly send someone else to assassinate the Lord of the Moon Palace." "Of course not," Luther agreed. "So I'm going to report back to him before we do anything else. Alex seems to have the support of many of the other martial arts groups here. With their support, he is challenging the leader of the Blood Brothers. Are you writing this down?" "I am," Ryan said. "I'm sure Tyson will take this challenge seriously. He is very interested in the Moon Palace." "Is he still in seclusion?" Luther asked. "I thought it usually took him around 43 days to master that technique." "Tyson is much faster than most," Ryan said. "We expect him back within days." "Okay," Luther said, feeling relieved. "Please tell me what he says when he hears about this." "Okay, I will, Mr. Duncan." Ryan ended the call. "I've done what you said," Luther said to Alex. "Don't worry. Tyson will consider the matter carefully." "Well done," Alex said, nodding his approval. Luther was comforted by the thought that Alex was a dead man walking. Even if he wasn't killed within the next couple of days, Tyson would destroy him as soon as he returned. Luther had seen how powerful Tyson was, and he knew no one could match his abilities. "Well, can we put aside our mutual hatred for now?" Luther asked, keeping his voice steady. "We can pick this up again once Tyson arrives." He knew he had to be respectful while Alex had the upper hand. Tyson had reminded him that he needed to use his brain more, so Luther was attempting to control his temper. If Alex let him live, then he could always find another opportunity to carry out the assassination. "Yes, if you want to get on your knees and apologize to me, then I'll let you go," Alex said. "Oh, and I want your word that you will never again step foot in Baltimore." All of the members of the Blood Brothers turned to look at Luther, their jaws clenched with anger. Alex was going too far. If Luther agreed, then the Blood Brothers would suffer for it. "How dare you?" Luther said, losing his temper. "Don't push your luck. Go to any city and ask about me, and they'll tell you I'm not someone you should mess with." "And there's the real Luther," Alex drawled. "I knew you would never really agree to a truce." He closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. A bead of sweat rolled down Luther's face. "Wait," he said. "Just hold on a minute. Let me think." Luther's eyes darted around the room as he muttered to himself, trying to find a way out of this without losing his dignity. The wall clock ticked loudly in the quiet room. The gang members were all watching Luther, waiting for his response. They were all tough men who had been carefully selected by Luther for an important job, but Luther's appearance had interrupted their plans. Even the two beautiful women were curious. Would Luther be forced to kneel and beg for forgiveness? The silence stretched on, becoming ever more uncomfortable. Alex raised an eyebrow, waiting for Luther to begin. Luther slowly kneeled before Alex. His eyes stared blankly into space, and his face was devoid of expression, as though he were distancing himself from what he was doing. Alex watched him, totally in control of the situation. "Get on with it before I fall asleep," Alex said. "It's a small price to pay for staying alive. Of course, your gang doesn't value life much, does it?" Luther remained quiet, refusing to react to Alex taunting him. All of his men were stunned, and the two women laughed. When Luther had finished begging, everyone began to relax. But then Luther burst into action, leaping to his feet and kicking out, sending one of the women crashing into the wall. She dropped to the floor, clutching her chest and grimacing with pain. She struggled to get up for a moment, and then she simply lay still. A gunshot rang out, and the other woman dropped to the floor. Luther roared loudly, startling his men into action. They picked up their guns and began to fire, spraying bullets at the chair where Alex was sitting. Smoke filled the room as the gang members shot wildly, sure that they had killed Alex. But when they stopped firing and looked closer, all they saw was a broken chair on the floor. There was no sign of Alex. They spun around, their eyes searching the room, but there was no trace of him. "He can't be human," one of the gangsters said, making a gesture to ward off evil spirits. "How could he possibly have escaped?" Could Alex have moved faster than the eye could see? "Find him!" Luther ordered. "We must show him how powerful we are." He held up his gun and stalked around the room, trying to locate Alex. Alex had to die, and it couldn't be an easy death. Not after he had humiliated Luther. No. Alex needed to suffer. Otherwise, Alex would lose the respect of the entire gang. Episode 372, Everyone Must Pay. When the shooting had begun, Alex had gotten out of the way. Now he switched off the lights, plunging the room into darkness. A moment later, the lights turned on again, and a voice came from behind Luther. "Looking for me?" Luther realized Alex was standing behind him, holding a broken piece of a bottle against Luther's throat. He broke out in a cold sweat. How on earth had Alex managed to avoid so many bullets? It simply wasn't possible. "Are you planning to take revenge on me for killing those women?" Luther asked, closing his eyes. "No," Alex said, shrugging. "Those two women were killers, and their souls were stained with the blood of many innocent people. They were probably even more evil than you. Otherwise, do you really think I would have let you kill them?" "Mr. Ambrose, I'm sure we can work something out," Luther said, glancing down at the broken bottle. "After all, I'm the only person here that you can deal with." He remembered Tyson's previous advice and tried to be smart about this. One of his men, Harley Gomez, raised his gun and aimed at Luther and Alex. "What are you doing?" Luther roared. "Are you crazy? Put the gun down!" He knew Alex was going to kill him. After all, Alex was right. Luther was not a good man, and he had killed hundreds of people. Alex seemed to take exception to that. Luther still hoped to get out of this, so he had no intention of dropping his own gun. But if that idiot Harley didn't back down, he might get Luther killed. Harley's gaze flickered over him, and then he gave Luther a cruel smile. "From the moment you knelt down and begged for your life, you lost the right to lead us," Harley said. "You're a disgrace to the Blood Brothers. If we go back home with you in charge, then Tyson will kill us all." "Don't be stupid! This is all part of the plan!" Luther screamed, horrified when he realized what was happening. "Don't you understand?" "I'm sorry, boss," Harley said, shrugging. "You know how it works. We can no longer follow you." Harley took aim and pulled the trigger, firing repeatedly, hitting Luther. The rest of the gang was a little uncertain. They stood quietly, looking around and noticing that Alex was gone. "What the hell is going on here?" Harley demanded. He couldn't believe his eyes. How did Alex keep doing that? The silence was deafening. A few minutes later, Alex stepped back into sight. "I could kill you one by one, and you would never see me coming," he said, smiling at them. "But that wouldn't be very sporting, would it? So this is your one chance. Go ahead, shoot me." He spread his arms wide. The gang members were a little scared, but they were also angry, so they raised their weapons and started shooting. Once again, Alex avoided being hit. But this time, instead of disappearing, he made his way straight at them. He sped through the room, taking the men's guns from them one at a time. Then he stepped aside and looked at the men. The gang members looked around, stunned that their guns had vanished. Nobody dared to speak. Some of them rubbed at their arms, clearly feeling some pain from being forcibly disarmed. They all realized that they were no match for Alex, and their mission had become a fiasco. "You win," Harley said, scowling at him. "But you've signed your own death warrant. From this day forward, you're an enemy of the Blood Brothers, and you will never know peace again. We won't stop until we've killed you." "Is that so?" Alex said, raising an eyebrow. "Are you threatening me? You know, I was going to spare your miserable lives, but now I've changed my mind." He smiled. These gang members were all the same. Even when they were losing, they continued to act tough. Luther looked around at them. "Aren't you going to ask me for mercy, like Luther did?" he asked. Everyone remained silent. "Then you can all die together," Alex said. "Wait!" one man yelled, raising his hands. "Please spare my life." Alex nodded and walked over to him. Then he punched the man, sending him sprawling. "You can be my messenger," Alex said. "Go and tell the Blood Brothers what has happened here." He dragged the man to his feet and held him still, staring into his eyes. The man gulped, clearly afraid, and Alex pushed him away. "Run, and don't ever come back here again." The man stumbled out of the room, moving as quickly as he could. Some of the men began to laugh as they watched him flee, while others sneered with contempt. Alex turned to face them, his expression calm. Anyone who wanted to harm the people he cared about must be punished. Even the man he had allowed to escape was living on borrowed time. Alex had only let him live so he could report back to Tyson. He looked around the room, and then he got to work, making every member of the gang pay. Thankfully, the room was soundproofed, so no one came to investigate the disturbance. Once he was done, the room was eerily quiet. "You have no one to blame but yourselves for what happened here," Alex said. "You went too far." He stepped outside and breathed in the fresh air, feeling at peace. After Alex had left, Art Stedman sent someone to clean up the scene and make it look like nothing had happened. Art had sent the two beautiful women after Luther, and he couldn't afford to have them traced back to him. He hoped to capture Luther alive and interrogate him to discover how his son had died. Before, Art had concluded that Chris had been killed by the Blood Brothers gang. But now, he suspected that Alex and the Clifton family had murdered his son. Episode 373, Celebrations and Challenges. It was common knowledge that both the Stedman family and the Clifton family had each suffered their biggest setback in recent years. Since the death of his son, Chris, Art had asked for a long leave of absence, and Jessup had been leaving everything to his son Rufus. Whenever Rufus was uncertain about anything, he would ask Alex for help. In the far north of Canada, Tyson stood up, shaking ice and snow from his clothing. 6 men stood behind him, all dressed in black. "Congratulations. You have officially completed the training," one of the men said. Tyson nodded and turned to look at the sky, where a helicopter was approaching. Once it landed, Tyson got in and looked at the man sitting next to him. "I was expecting Luther," Tyson said. "Where is he?" The man began to speak and then ground to a halt, not sure how to break the news. "What happened?" Tyson demanded. "Luther is dead," the man said, his shoulders slumping. "Alex killed him." "Oh?" Tyson asked, no change in his expression. He looked out at the snow below them. "Death is merely part of life. It's of no consequence." Luther's death would unsettle the Blood Brothers, but for Tyson, Luther was simply one of many gang members. His loss meant nothing. "Sir, we must do something about Alex," the man said. "He defeated everyone we sent to deal with him, and he threatened—" He paused, reluctant to say anything that would make Tyson angry. "Spit it out," Tyson said. "Alex threatened you," the man said, clearly angry. "He has publicly challenged you. And with you being away in seclusion, some people are claiming that you've been hiding because you're afraid of him. The reputation of the entire Blood Brothers gang is at stake." "Alex is nothing," Tyson scoffed. "Yes, he killed some members of the Blood Brothers, but he's just a security guard. He's a nobody. How can I lower myself to fight with him? He's not worth my time." Tyson had been around for a long time, and he knew that the world was always changing. When he had been young, he had always sought out people who were above him and challenged them, trying to find his place in the world. The other man sighed. He wanted Tyson to fight, and he was growing frustrated. "Alex is standing in the way of all our plans," he said. "If we don't get rid of him, it'll ruin the reputation of the Blood Brothers. And yet every action we've taken against him has failed. No one's been able to defeat him, and everyone who tries is risking death. We need you to deal with him. He's no longer an ordinary security guard." He trailed off, shrugging. "Then what is he?" Tyson asked, forcing himself to stop gritting his teeth. He was furious that Alex had defeated so many of the Blood Brothers, but he refused to show it. "He has become the Lord of the Moon Palace," the man said. "In terms of rank, he's now your equal." "Good," Tyson said. a slow smile appearing. When he had been young, his teacher had once told him that the Moon Palace was much more important than it seemed. It wasn't well known, but it was extremely powerful. If Alex was the Lord of the Moon Palace, then Tyson could accept his challenge. The other man described how Alex had fought the gang, and Tyson listened carefully. Then he said, "Yes, I will fight Alex." Then he laughed loudly, the sound echoing in the snowy landscape. Tyson had accepted Alex's challenge to demonstrate the consequences of challenging the Blood Brothers. But it was also part of his inevitable battle with the martial arts community. Alex had already killed some of Tyson's most skilled men. But Tyson was certain of his victory. He would kill this lowly security guard, and then the martial arts community would know not to cross him. Debbie and Jessup had been spending time together in the Clifton mansion. They enjoyed each other's company, and Jessup's mood had greatly improved from spending time with his lovely granddaughter. He had loved his daughter very much, and Debbie strongly reminded him of her. Now he adored Debbie. Callisto had been joined by the other 3 Moon Maidens who had come to visit Alex. Once things had settled down, Alex had decided that he and Callisto would return to the Moon Palace to make sure everything was okay, and Jessup had loaned them a car for the trip. 2 weeks after Alex had left, the surviving members of the Clifton family gathered to hold a banquet. It was Cynthia's birthday, and Jessup wanted to honor her. No one in the wider community had been invited, only family. After everything that had happened, the Clifton family was more united than ever. "This is my beloved Cynthia's birthday," Jessup said, "and we're here to remember her and celebrate her life. Unfortunately, Alex can't be here with us, but I would like to propose a toast to him." Alex had been a great friend to the Clifton family, so everyone raised their glass and said, "To Alex!" "We are fortunate to have such a good friend in Alex," Jessup continued. "His skill makes him one of the most powerful martial artists around." "Yes," someone called. "Why don't you put Alex in charge?" "We'll have to ask Debbie," Jessup said, laughing. "She can decide." A voice called out from beyond the room. "Do you really think Alex is the most powerful martial artist? That's a big claim." "Who's there?" Jessup asked. Everyone glared in the direction of the voice. Who had dared to arrive here uninvited? Jessup looked at the door and noted the bodyguards standing in front of it. Should he let the visitor in? What if it was someone dangerous? An old man walked in, striding confidently, and a younger man followed him. "Who are you?" Jessup asked, frowning. The old man exuded power, but Jessup was sure he had never seen him before. "When the Blood Brothers took on the martial arts community, Alex defeated them," Jessup said. "He's clearly the most powerful martial artist in the world." "Just because he killed Lee Harshaw?" the old man asked, laughing. He shook his head. "Lee was simply a soldier for the Blood Brothers, and he wasn't well known within the martial arts community. Defeating him meant nothing." "Those are big words, but you're talking nonsense," Rufus said, his face turning red with anger. Episode 374, Time Flies. "Big words," the old man repeated, shaking his head. "I had heard that the Clifton family in Baltimore was important, but now I see it's nothing." "How dare you!" someone called, as the whole family got to their feet, several of them brandishing weapons, Furious, they were ready to attack the man as soon as Jessup ordered it. No one could insult the Clifton family in front of Jessup. They wouldn't stand for it. The bodyguards walked over, and the dinner party was all but forgotten. The old man didn't even look at the people who were scowling at him. "It's not an insult," he said with a faint smile. "Few families in the world can compare with me." Jessup wasn't happy, but he didn't know how to react. Not without knowing who this man was or why he was here. He glanced at the other members of his family and then turned back to the old man. "You say Lee was nothing," he said. "Are you claiming to be more powerful than Lee?" The old man chuckled. "Lee was one of the top fighters for the Blood Brothers," he said. "He had a fair amount of skill and he practiced constantly. He fought me once, and he ended up in a coma. Still, I was impressed by his courage, so when he woke up, I gave him some advice. At the time, I never expected him to improve so much and make a name for himself." Jessup was shocked. Did the old man believe what he was saying? If this was true, then his skills must be much greater than those of Lee. No wonder he was so arrogant. Everyone was stunned. They were all aware of how strong Lee had been, and they could never have defeated him. Luckily, Alex had done it for them. The younger man's expression shone with pride as he looked at the old man. "What are you doing here?" Jessup asked, having decided not to provoke him. They already had enough enemies, so they didn't need any more. It was better to be cautious. The old man didn't answer. Instead, he looked around and saw an enormous clock in the garden. A gift from the Baltimore underworld. The clock had stood in the garden for many years. Its copper color shone in the sunlight, highlighting its ornate decoration, which was a testament to the importance of the Clifton family. The old man walked over to the clock and placed the palm of his hand against it. Everyone watched, unsure what the old man planned to do. "Nice clock," the old man said, patting it. "But it really needs to be higher up so it can be seen from further away. Otherwise, what's the use of it?" Jessup watched the old man, not bothering to answer. The old man squatted down and gripped the bottom of the clock. Then he straightened up, lifting the exceptionally heavy clock above his head. His face showed no sign of strain. Everyone gasped as they watched, knowing they couldn't have lifted it. One man was so stunned that he sat down hard, his mouth hanging open. How could an old man do such a thing? He made it look effortless, as though it weighed as much as a feather. No one had ever lifted the clock before, and they weren't sure that even Alex would have been able to do it. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, then they would never have believed it. The old man still held the clock up in the air. Then he walked over to a large tree. He didn't seem to be struggling under the clock's weight, and each step was steady. He hung the clock on a branch of the tree, but the tree couldn't take the weight, and the large branch snapped. "I guess the tree isn't as strong as I am," the old man said, catching the clock before it hit the ground. He walked over and put it back in its place. No one dared to get in his way. He was far too strong. Not even the 4 moon maidens could match his power. Jessup frowned. He knew that the old man was deliberately displaying his strength as a threat. "Tyson Slade," Jessup said, realizing the old man's identity. This was a disaster. The Clifton family was now in serious trouble. His family all began to talk at once. They had heard of Tyson, but they had never expected him to come out to see them like this. The leader of the Blood Brothers gang? He's here in person? How could this happen? Everyone knew that the Blood Brothers gang was an enemy of the Clifton family. The Stedman family had relied on the gang in the past, and the Cliftons had suffered for it. The Clifton family was now in a lot of trouble. I see you've heard of me, Tyson said, looking around at the panic-stricken people. Jessup was surprised, but he didn't show it. The leader of the Blood Brothers visiting my home? Jessup asked. Are you looking for revenge? Jessup was an old man, and he no longer feared death, so he refused to be intimidated. The rest of the Clifton family followed his example, preparing themselves for the attack. Tyson slowly approached them. Revenge on the Clifton family? He asked. Why bother? It would be like squashing bugs. He pinned Jessup with his gaze. Where is Alex? Jessup was stunned. Alex left here 2 weeks ago, he said, his tone steady. I'm afraid you've missed him. Mo, is that so? Tyson asked, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. Everyone shivered under his attention. Tyson grabbed the huge clock and threw it at a wall, sending bricks flying. Episode 375, Freeze. When the dust finally settled around the smashed pieces of clock and brick, Tyson turned back to the party and pointed a finger at the rubble. Alex killed the top fighters of the Blood Brothers, and he has issued a challenge to me, Tyson said. Anyone who helps him will end up like that clock. Jessup glared at him, but he knew he was no match for Tyson, who was unpredictable when he was angry. Afraid for the members of his family, Jessup said nothing. The others were terrified, and several of them were visibly shaking. If not for Jessup, then they might have fled. Other than Jessup, only Debbie held her head high, like a proud princess, refusing to yield. Are you crazy? Rufus whispered to her, tugging at her sleeve. Keep your head down. He was worried that her defiance would attract Tyson's attention. Jessup glanced at her, appreciating her bravery. Debbie was the leader of the Black Orchid cult, as well as a Clifton. She shouldn't be afraid of anyone. Everyone kept their eyes down, but they peeked at Debbie, worried about her. This is Alex's enemy, someone muttered to her. Debbie, you need to back down. Debbie ignored them all and gently pushed her uncle's hand away. She straightened her spine, looking straight at Tyson, refusing to cower in front of him. Tyson noticed, and he was very interested in Debbie's actions. He stepped forward, looking closely at her. Debbie? He asked. Art told me that you're with Alex. Aren't you afraid of me? I am the leader of the Black Orchid cult, Debbie said, her voice firm. Why should I be afraid of a gang leader? I've never heard of the Black Orchid cult, Tyson said, completely uninterested. But if you're Alex's woman, then you're my enemy. And I can tell from your tone that you despise me. Still, if you vow to cut off all contact with Alex, then I might be able to forgive you. Is that right? Debbie asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, I am Alex's woman, as he put it, and I will never betray him. I should have known that whoever Alex chose would be steel wrapped in velvet, Tyson said. Such a shame. You have more integrity than any of the men around here. He sighed, shaking his head. What a pity. Rufus felt humiliated and wished the ground would open up and swallow him. Other members of the Clifton family were filled with shame, but no one dared to challenge Tyson. Sadly, you will pay for that integrity, Tyson said. I admire you, I really do. But Alex killed many members of my gang, and they must be avenged. His expression turned menacing. Since Alex isn't here, then I guess you'll have to pay the price, he said. Come here, Debbie. Debbie clenched her fists and didn't move. Tyson walked over to her, refusing to break eye contact. He raised his right hand, touching her shoulder and channeling his inner power. Debbie's face grew pale. How could she not be afraid of what was happening? But she wanted to make Alex proud, so she couldn't run away. She tipped up her chin and prepared for whatever Tyson was going to do. The power flowed into Debbie, sending ice shooting through her veins. Tyson's power was exceptionally cold, and she began to shiver. Even though she was wearing a warm sweater, she felt like she was being encased in ice, and she trembled violently. Her teeth chattered and she couldn't stop it, no matter how hard she tried. She felt like she was becoming a living ice sculpture. The people standing next to her shivered. Even just being near her was enough for them to feel cold. Debbie! Jessup called, tears shining in his eyes. He hated seeing his beloved granddaughter suffer, but he didn't know how to help her. My inner power is extremely cold, Tyson said. Cold enough to kill. This power will attack you once every 24 hours, and each attack will be stronger than the last. If Alex doesn't appear soon, then you'll not be able to withstand this. Eventually, you'll simply freeze to death. He sounded unemotional, as though he didn't care about Debbie's fate. But everyone else was shocked and frightened. They had never heard of such a thing, and they struggled to believe it. But the evidence was right there in front of them. Debbie's lips were turning blue, and her skin was ashen. How could Tyson have such power? They knew Tyson had told the truth, and they hated him for his cruelty. But not one of them spoke up, too afraid that he would kill them. Despite the numbness, Debbie was in pain, and her eyes sparkled with unshed tears. She blinked furiously, trying to hold them back. I will not let Alex down by crying, she thought. I will not cry, no matter what. You have a strong will, Tyson said approvingly. It's a shame that you chose to align yourself with Alex. He shook his head. If you're thinking about seeking medical assistance, don't bother. You won't find any help there. I advise you to focus on getting Alex to come back. You monster! Jessup yelled in a hoarse voice. How can you attack an innocent woman? He felt like his heart was breaking. And how do you expect Alex to know where to find you? I do whatever I need to, Tyson replied. Tell Alex that I'll be waiting for him at the mouth of the Hudson River. With that, he strode away, not bothering to look back. The younger man who had accompanied Tyson looked contemptuously at everyone, and then he turned and left. As soon as Tyson had gone, Jessup collapsed, and Rufus rushed to help him. "You have to be strong," he said. Jessup sighed. "Go and find Alex," he said. "Tell him to come back." Debbie stood there, her face as white as snow. She couldn't even speak.
Thank you for listening to Crown TV. Please don't forget to subscribe, share and turn on the notification button.